They told me Verrick Blackwood was a monster, an apex predator in an Armani suit who swallowed companies whole and tore apart anyone who crossed him. My pack didn't just sign a treaty with him, they signed a deed of sale. Me. They traded my life to wipe out a decade of bad investments and gambling debts. I was supposed to be trembling. I was supposed to be packing a bag and weeping into a handkerchief, waiting for his black SUV to collect me like an Amazon package. Instead, I'm doing 70 in a 40 zone, driving straight toward his 60-story fortress with a crumpled contract in my fist and enough rage to burn the whole city down. If he thinks he bought a submissive little pet, the big bad wolf is in for a very rude awakening. Welcome back to Eliana's Romance Library, your sanctuary for the best love stories on the web. Before we get lost in today's romance, I want to do a quick roll call. We are building a global family here, so head down to the comments and let me know. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Drop your city or your flag. I love seeing how far our community reaches. Now, get comfortable. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Intruder. The security guard at the front desk of the Spire looked like he was built out of granite and steroids. He was at least 6'5", wearing a suit that cost more than my car, and I could smell the distinct earthy musk of a shifter on him. A bear, maybe, or a very large mastiff. I marched across the marble lobby, my heels clicking a violent staccato against the floor. I didn't have an appointment. I didn't have a key card. What I had was a piece of paper that legally declared me property, and I intended to make someone eat it. "I'm here to see Verrick," I snapped, stopping in front of the desk. I didn't use his title. I didn't say Mr. Blackwood or Alpha or Prime. I threw his first name out like an insult. The guard looked down at me. I braced myself. I was 5'4" of pure fury, but I knew how this worked. He would tell me to leave. I would refuse. He would try to grab my arm. I would likely break a nail trying to gouge his eye out. It was going to be a scene. The guard blinked. He didn't growl. He didn't reach for a taser. He just tapped his earpiece. "Ms. Harrow is here," he murmured. He paused, listening to a voice I couldn't hear, and then nodded. He looked back at me, his expression somewhere between terrified and confused. "Elevator 4, penthouse level. It's unlocked for you." I froze, my combat instinct stalling out. "What?" "He's expecting you, ma'am." "He doesn't even know I'm coming," I argued, though I wasn't sure why I was arguing against an easy entry. The guard just pressed a button under his desk, and the elevator doors behind me chimed softly. "With all due respect, Ms. Harrow, I don't think Verrick Blackwood breathes without knowing where you are. I'd go up if I were you. He hates waiting." I narrowed my eyes at him, suspicious of the ease of it all, but I wasn't going to waste the opening. I spun around and marched into the elevator. The ride up was agonizing. 50 floors of smooth, silent ascent. The walls were mirrored, forcing me to look at myself. I hadn't dressed for seduction. I had dressed for war. Sharp black blazer, dark jeans, boots that could kick through drywall. My hair was a chaotic mess of wind-blown waves, and my cheeks were flushed red with adrenaline. I didn't look like a Luna. I looked like a liability. Good. The elevator didn't open into a hallway. It opened directly into a boardroom, a massive glass-walled space overlooking the entire city skyline. And it was full. At least 20 people, humans and shifters alike, sat around a table made of dark, polished wood that looked like it had been carved from a single ancient tree. The air in the room was heavy, thick with the scent of money, fear, and power. A man in a gray suit was in the middle of a presentation, pointing at a projection of stock trends. "And as you can see, the acquisition of the Northern Territory will triple our—" I stepped off the elevator. "Verrick Blackwood." The silence that slammed into the room was absolute. The man at the projector stopped mid-sentence. 20 heads snapped toward me. Some looked horrified, others looked like they were praying for my soul. And there at the head of the table sat the monster. He was sprawled in a high-back leather chair, looking bored out of his mind. He was darker than the photos. Dark hair, sharp features that looked like they'd been cut from glass, and broad shoulders that strained the fabric of a suit that was definitely bespoke. He wasn't looking at the presentation. He was looking at a fountain pen he was twirling between his long, dexterous fingers. When I shouted his name, he didn't jump. He didn't even look surprised. He just stopped twirling the pen. Slowly, terrifyingly, he lifted his head. His eyes met mine across the length of the table. They weren't brown or blue. They were molten, shifting gold, the mark of a prime. A predator who didn't just lead the pack, he was the pack. My heart hammered against my ribs, a traitorous rhythm of fear, but I suffocated it with anger. I marched down the length of the room, ignoring the gasps of the board members. I didn't stop until I was standing right next to him. I slammed the crumpled contract onto the polished wood, right on top of his notepad. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You think you can buy me?" I hissed, my voice trembling not with fear, but with the sheer effort of not screaming. "You think because my pack is pathetic and my father is a coward that you can just sign a check and own me?" Verrick looked at the papers. Then he looked up at me. Up close, the intensity of him was suffocating. He smelled like cedar, rain, and something dangerous that made the hair on my arms stand up. I pointed a finger directly at his chest, right over his heart. "You have no control over me," I declared, staring into those golden eyes. "I am not an asset. I am not a line item, and I am definitely not yours." The room held its collective breath. I saw the man in the gray suit flinch, waiting for the bloodshed. "You didn't talk to a prime like this. You didn't interrupt his meetings. You certainly didn't threaten him." Verrick stared at me for one long, agonizing second. His face was unreadable, a mask of cold indifference. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. He didn't look at his security team. He didn't look at his board of directors. He kept his eyes locked on mine, and he leaned back in his chair, a low, rumbling sound vibrating in his chest. It wasn't a growl. It was a purr. "Everyone out," he said softly. "But sir," the presenter stammered. "The merger," I said. Verrick shifted his gaze to the man, and for a split second, the human facade slipped, revealing the beast beneath. "Get out. Now." Chairs scraped violently against the floor. It was a stampede. In less than 10 seconds, the room was empty. The door clicked shut, leaving us alone in the glass box high above the world. Verrick stood up. He was massive. He towered over me, blocking out the light from the windows, sucking all the air out of the room. I took a step back, my bravado flickering for the first time. He walked around the table, stalking toward me with a slow, predatory grace. He stopped inches from me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off his body. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face. I flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, his fingers brushed a lock of hair away from my cheek, his touch so gentle it was terrifying. "Control?" he whispered, his voice dropping an octave, wrapping around me like smoke. "Liora, I don't want to control you." He reached past me and locked the boardroom door with a heavy, metallic thud. "I've just been waiting for you to come home." Chapter 2. The Ashes. "Come home?" I repeated the words, tasting them like spoiled milk. "I don't know what kind of delusional fantasy you're living in, Verrick, but this isn't a reunion. This is a hostage situation." My heart was doing gymnastics in my chest, half terror, half rage, but I refused to let him see it. I kept my chin high, watching him with the wary stillness of a deer facing down a wolf. The boardroom door was locked. We were 50 stories up, and the man standing in front of me was reportedly strong enough to snap a steel beam like a dry twig. Verrick didn't move to attack. He didn't even look annoyed by my accusation. He just walked slowly back to the head of the table, his movements fluid and unnervingly quiet for a man of his size. He picked up the crumpled contract I'd slammed down moments ago. He smoothed out the wrinkles with a strange, almost reverence care, his large thumb tracing the signature line where my father had signed away my future. "A hostage situation implies leverage," he said, his voice a low baritone that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "It implies that I want to keep you here against your will to extract something. You bought my debt," I snapped, crossing my arms over my chest to hide the fact that my hands were shaking. $3 million. You think I believe you paid that out of the kindness of your heart? What do you want? Labor? Breeding rights? A trophy for your mantle? Verrick stopped smoothing the paper. His golden eyes flashed, a sudden spark of genuine irritation that vanished as quickly as it appeared. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a heavy gold lighter. He flipped the lid with a metallic clink. I don't want your labor, Liora. I have thousands of employees for that. I don't want a trophy. I have shelves full of them, and they are boring because they don't talk back. He flicked the wheel. A tall, perfect flame sprang to life. Without breaking eye contact with me, he held the corner of the contract to the fire. I gasped, involuntarily taking a step forward. What are you doing? Removing the leverage, he said calmly. We both watched as the flame caught the heavy bond paper. It curled and blackened, the fire eating through the legal jargon, the clauses of ownership, and finally my father's signature. Verrick held it until the heat must have been searing his fingertips, then casually dropped the burning remnant into a crystal ashtray on the table. We watched it turn to ash. There, he said, dusting off his hands. The debt is gone. The contract is void. You don't owe me a cent. You don't owe me your time. You certainly don't owe me your submission. My mouth fell open. I scrambled for a retort, for a weapon, but he had just disarmed me completely. That was $3 million. Pocket change, he dismissed, walking around the table toward me again. I'd pay double just to see that look of confusion on your face. It's adorable. I am not adorable, I hissed, finding my footing again. I am furious. You're free, he corrected. He stopped 3 feet away from me. The elevator is behind you. The code is 8888. My driver is downstairs. He will take you anywhere you want to go. Back to your pack, to the airport, to a hotel. It's your choice. I looked at the elevator doors. They were right there. I could leave. I could walk out, debt-free, and never look back at this terrifyingly handsome billionaire wolf ever again. It was exactly what I wanted. It was the victory I had come here to scream for. But my feet didn't move. Why did he do it? Men like Verrick Blackwood didn't just burn money. There was an angle. There had to be an angle. If I walked out now, I'd spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's the catch? I demanded, narrowing my eyes. No catch, Verrick said, shoving his hands into his pockets. The action pulled the fabric of his suit tight across his shoulders. Just an invitation. You can leave, Liora, or you can come upstairs with me, have dinner, and let me explain why I've spent the last 10 years ensuring no other alpha in the country even looked in your direction. My breath hitched. 10 years? You've been stalking me? Guarding you, he corrected softly. He took 1 step closer, invading my personal bubble. Suddenly, the air in the room changed. It wasn't just oxygen anymore. It was charged, heavy with static. I could smell him, really smell him, and it wasn't just expensive cologne. It was the scent of deep woods, ozone, and raw power. It hit me in the solar plexus, a physical tug that made my knees wobble. My inner wolf, usually dormant and quiet, suddenly woke up and started pacing in my chest, whining, "Mate, mate, mate." I held my ground, looking up at him. He was so tall I had to crane my neck. "If I stay for dinner," I said, my voice sounding breathier than I intended. "It's an interrogation, not a date." Verrick smiled. It wasn't the polite smile he'd likely worn for his board members. It was a slow, wicked curve of his lips that promised trouble. "Call it whatever you want, Liora," he whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from my ear. "Just don't run." Chapter 3. The Sanctuary. The elevator ride from the boardroom to the penthouse was only 2 floors, but it felt like crossing into a different dimension. The boardroom had been cold, corporate, and sterile, glass and steel designed to intimidate. As the doors slid open to the residential level, I expected a bachelor pad. I expected black leather couches, chrome statues, and maybe a shark tank. Something that screamed, "I am a rich, lonely monster." Instead, I stepped into warmth. The penthouse was expansive, yes, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city lights blinking to life in the twilight. But the floor was covered in plush vintage rugs that looked soft enough to sleep on. The walls were lined with bookshelves, not decorative ones filled with encyclopedias nobody read, but chaotic, overstuffed shelves crammed with paperbacks, worn hardcovers, and maps. And the smell. It didn't smell like a hotel. It smelled like vanilla bean, old paper, and me. I froze in the entryway. On the console table next to the door, there was a vase. It wasn't filled with red roses, the generic "I'm rich and romantic" flower. It was filled with white tiger lilies, my favorite. The specific flower I had told my sister 6 years ago was the only thing I'd ever want at my wedding. "You like them?" Verrick's voice came from behind me. He had discarded his suit jacket in the elevator, and now he was rolling up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, exposing forearms that were thick with muscle and dusted with dark hair. "This is creepy," I said, walking into the room and spinning around to face him. "This isn't charming, Verrick. This is surveillance. How do you know I like tiger lilies? I haven't posted that on social media. I haven't told anyone but family." Verrick walked past me toward a stunningly modern kitchen, looking completely at ease while I was spiraling. "I told you. I pay attention. Most alphas look at a woman and see a rank or a breeding heritage. I looked at you and saw details." He opened a cabinet and pulled out a tin of tea. "Earl Grey? Extra bergamot? Loose leaf? Not bags? Correct?" I opened my mouth to argue, but the protest died in my throat. That was my tea. The specific brand I had to order online because no store in town carried it. "You're trying to buy me with flowers and tea now?" I asked, crossing my arms. "You think, because you know my Starbucks order, I'm going to swoon?" "I think," Verrick said, setting the kettle on the stove, "that you have spent your entire life being treated like an afterthought by your pack. You're the fierce middle child, the one who fixes everyone's problems but never gets asked how her day was. I think you're exhausted, Liora. And I think you're terrified that this," he gestured to the room, "is a trap, because you can't imagine someone wanting to give you what you want without taking something in return." I flinched. It was a direct hit. He hadn't just read my file, he had read my soul. "I'm not exhausted," I lied, though my shoulders felt heavy. "I'm observant. And I see a cage. A very nice, expensive cage, but a cage." Verrick turned off the stove before the water even boiled. He walked toward me, his expression shifting from playful to intense. "Explore. Find a lock. Find a camera. Find a single thing in this house that limits you. If you find one, I'll give you half my fortune." I took him up on the challenge. I wandered through the living area, running my hand over the velvet armchairs. I checked the balcony doors. Unlocked. I checked the hallway. I pushed open a set of double doors at the end of the hall, expecting a gym or an office. I stopped dead. It was a bedroom, but not a guest room. The walls were painted a deep, soothing indigo, the exact color of the walls in my childhood room before my father sold the house. There were blackout curtains, a massive window seat piled high with pillows, and the bed. It was enormous, a California king that looked like a cloud, but it was the pillows that stopped my heart. There were 2 distinct sets. One side was neat, military corners, firm pillows. The other side, my side, was a chaos of soft, downy pillows, a weighted blanket, and a silk eye mask resting on the nightstand. It was a nest. In werewolf culture, a nest wasn't just a bed. It was a sanctuary where a mate felt safe enough to sleep deeply, to be vulnerable. You didn't build a nest for a hookup. You built it for a wife. Verrick hadn't just prepared a room for me. He had built a life for us, waiting for the day I would walk into it. I felt him come up behind me. He didn't touch me, but his heat radiated against my back. "I've slept on the couch for 3 years," he whispered, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name, because I couldn't bring myself to sleep in this bed until you were in it. I turned around slowly. He was standing in the doorway, blocking the exit, looking at me with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. "Verrick?" I breathed, my voice trembling. "Don't worry," he said, his eyes dropping to my lips. "I won't touch you. Not yet. But you should know. The door to this room doesn't lock from the outside. It only locks from the inside. If you sleep here, I can't get in." He leaned against the door frame, a dark, tempting silhouette. "Unless, of course, you invite me." Chapter 4. The Predator's Dinner. "I'll take my chances with the lock," I said, backing out of the bedroom as if the duvet cover might bite me. Verrick didn't stop me. He just watched me retreat down the hallway with that maddeningly patient half-smile, like a cat watching a mouse scurry into a corner from which there is no escape. Dinner was served 20 minutes later, and it was an exercise in ridiculous opulence. The dining room was dimly lit, illuminated mostly by the city lights bleeding in through the glass walls. The table was long enough to seat 12 people, a slab of dark marble that looked cold and imposing. I expected him to sit at the head of the table and place me at the other end, shouting conversation across a 10-foot divide like we were in a bad period drama. Instead, the place settings were arranged side by side at the head, close enough to touch. "Sit," Verrick said, pulling out a velvet-upholstered chair. "I can pull my own chair," I muttered, but I sat anyway. The food appeared from nowhere, staff I still hadn't seen. It was a perfectly seared steak, rare, with truffle mashed potatoes and asparagus that looked like it had been grown in a greenhouse on Mars. It smelled divine. Verrick sat next to me, pouring a glass of dark red wine. "To freedom," he toasted, clinking his glass against mine. I took a sip. It was expensive. "To unexpected severance packages," I corrected. "So, tell me, Verrick. The rumors. They say you tore the throat out of the Alpha of the Southern Isles because he looked at you wrong. They say you own half the politicians in the capital. They call you the dangerous Lycan, yet here you are passing me the salt." Verrick cut into his steak with surgical precision. The knife sliced through the meat like it was butter. "People love monsters, Liora. It makes them feel better about their own mediocrity. If I'm a monster, they don't have to compete with me. They just have to survive me." "And are you?" I asked, watching him. "A monster?" He paused, a piece of rare meat halfway to his mouth. He turned his head, his golden eyes locking onto mine. "I am a wolf, Liora. We are all monsters in the right context. I have destroyed companies. I have ruined men who thought they could cheat me. I have a temper that I spend every waking second keeping on a leash." He took a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. "But violence is a tool, not a lifestyle." I looked at his plate. He had the larger steak. It was perfectly cooked, the center a deep bloody red that appealed to my own wolf's instincts. My steak was good, but his looked better. It was a test. In wolf hierarchy, you never touched an alpha's food. It was a challenge, a death wish. It was the quickest way to get your hand bitten off. I wanted to see the monster. I wanted to see the crack in the gentleman's armor. Without breaking eye contact, I reached over with my fork. I stabbed a piece of steak right off his plate, the best piece right from the center. Verrick froze. His hand tightened around his steak knife. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold until his eyes were almost black. The air in the room instantly grew heavy, the atmospheric pressure dropping as his dominance flared instinctively. I brought the meat to my lips, ate it, and chewed slowly. You're right. Yours is better." I waited for the growl. I waited for him to grab my wrist. Instead, Verrick let out a breath that sounded like a shudder. He didn't look angry. He looked intoxicated. He watched my mouth move, entranced by the defiance. Slowly, deliberately, He pushed his entire plate toward me. "Eat it," he commanded, his voice rougher than before. "I have my own," I said, though my heart was pounding. "I don't care," he rasped. "Take mine. Take all of it." He leaned in, his shoulder brushing mine, and the heat coming off him was searing. "You want to know if I'm dangerous, Liora? I am, but not to you. Never to you. You could burn this entire penthouse to the ground, and I would just stand in the ashes and ask if you were warm enough." He reached out, his large hand covering mine on the table. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, a touch so electrifying I nearly dropped my fork. "Finish your dinner," he whispered, his eyes dark with a terrifying level of adoration. "I like watching you eat. It reminds me that you're real." He pulled his hand back abruptly, as if touching me burned him, and stood up. "I need a drink. Finish the steak." He walked away toward the bar, his movements stiff and jerky, leaving me alone at the table with 2 dinners and a realization that terrified me more than any threat. He wasn't trying to dominate me. He was trying to survive me. Chapter 5. The Scent. The steak was delicious, but the adrenaline ruined my appetite. By midnight, the penthouse was silent. I had retreated to the guest bedroom. Not the nest, I couldn't handle the nest yet. But sleep was impossible. The sheets were too soft. The silence was too loud. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw Verrick's eyes dilating as I stole food from his plate. My inner wolf was pacing, agitated. He's here. He's close. Go to him. "Shut up," I whispered to the empty room. I needed a distraction. I slipped out of bed, wrapping a silk robe around myself. It was one I'd found in the closet, emerald green, my color again. Of course. I crept out into the hallway. The penthouse was dark, save for the moonlight spilling in through the massive windows. I wandered toward the library I had seen earlier. If I couldn't sleep, I would read. The library was a 2-story masterpiece of dark wood and spiral staircases. It smelled of old paper and leather. I scanned the shelves, running my fingers over the spines of first editions that probably cost more than my car. "Can't sleep?" The voice came from the shadows of a wingback chair in the corner. I jumped, spinning around. Verrick was sitting there, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had discarded his shirt. I froze. He was magnificent. It was unfair, really. Broad chest defined by slabs of muscle, a stomach ridged with tension and scars. Faint silver lines crisscrossing his ribs that hinted at a violent past he claimed to have left behind. His skin was tanned, glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You're naked," I blurted out. "I'm wearing pants," he drawled, taking a sip of his drink. "And this is my house, Liora. I usually sleep in less." He set the glass down and stood up. The movement was predatory, fluid. He walked out of the shadows, and the moonlight hit him full force. He looked less like a CEO and more like the Lycan Prime he was, wild, imposing, and lethal. "Why are you awake?" I asked, clutching the lapels of my robe together. "Because you are in my house," he said simply, closing the distance between us. "And I can hear your heart beating from the other side of the apartment. It's racing. Are you scared?" "No," I lied. "Liar." He stopped a foot away. The air between us crackled. This wasn't the playful banter of the dinner table. This was primal. It was the middle of the night, and our defenses were down. "You smell like rain," he murmured, leaning in. He didn't touch me. He just inhaled. "Rain and wild lilac. It's driving me insane." "Verrick. I've spent centuries surrounded by artificial scents," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated against my skin. "Expensive perfumes, cleaning chemicals, city smog. And then you walked into my boardroom and suddenly, for the first time in my life, I could breathe." He took another step. I backed up, hitting the bookshelf behind me. I was trapped. He placed his hands on the shelf on either side of my head, boxing me in. He leaned down, burying his face in the crook of my neck, I gasped. His nose brushed my skin, a wet, hot touch that sent a shockwave straight to my core. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering breath that sounded like a man surfacing after drowning. "Verrick, stop," I breathed, though my hands were itching to touch his bare chest. "I'm not touching you," he murmured against my throat. "I'm just memorizing." His lips grazed the sensitive spot below my ear. It wasn't a kiss. It was a tease, a promise. My knees buckled, and I would have slid to the floor if his body hadn't been so close, radiating heat that kept me upright. He pulled back slowly, his eyes blazing gold in the darkness. His restraint was palpable, a physical force holding back a tidal wave. He wanted to claim me. I could see it. I could feel his desire pressing against my mental shields. He wanted to bite, to mark, to take. But he didn't. "You have no idea," he rasped, his voice rough with pain. "How hard it is to stand this close to you and keep my hands on this shelf." He pushed himself away from the shelf with a groan, putting distance between us. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at me with a mixture of agony and affection. "Go to bed, Liora," he ordered, turning his back on me. "Lock the door. Because if you stay here looking at me like that, I'm going to forget that I'm a gentleman and I'm going to show you exactly why they call me dangerous." Chapter 6. The Gift. I didn't sleep. I laid in the bed staring at the ceiling until the sun came up, my skin still tingling where his breath had touched my neck. When I finally dragged myself out of the room at 8 a.m., the penthouse was empty. The silence was different in the daylight. It felt cold. I walked into the kitchen, half hoping to see him there, maybe making coffee shirtless. But the kitchen was pristine. There was a note on the counter, written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Had a meeting with the overseas investors. Didn't want to wake you. Eat something." I frowned. It felt normal, domestic. Like we were a couple who had been doing this for years, not two strangers trapped in a weird, fated mate standoff. A chime from the private elevator interrupted my thoughts. I jumped, expecting Verrick, but a young man in a courier uniform stepped out. "Delivery for Ms. Liora Harrow?" he asked, looking nervous. "That's me," I said, wary. He handed me a thick, heavy envelope. "Sign here, please." I signed, took the package, and waited for the elevator doors to close before I opened it. It was heavy. Legal documents. My stomach dropped. Was this another contract? Had Verrick lied about burning the debt? I tore open the seal and pulled out the stack of papers. I froze. It wasn't a debt collection. It was a deed. Property address, 42 Willow Creek Lane. My hand flew to my mouth. Willow Creek. My mother's house. The house where I grew up. The one with the wraparound porch and the oak tree where I'd had my first shift. My father had gambled it away 5 years ago. It had been sold to a developer who planned to bulldoze it for condos. I had cried for weeks when we lost it. It was the only place I had ever felt safe. I flipped through the pages. The transfer was complete. The mortgage was paid in full. The developer had been bought out, probably for an obscene amount of money. And the owner's name at the bottom wasn't Verrick Blackwood. It was Liora Harrow. He hadn't bought it for himself. He hadn't bought it to hold over my head. He had bought it, paid it off, and put it entirely in my name. I could leave right now, go there, and live rent-free for the rest of my life. He had literally handed me the keys to my independence. A note fell out of the back of the folder. "You said I couldn't buy you? You were right. But I can buy back the things that were stolen from you. It's not a cage if you have somewhere else to go. Go look at the garden. I hear the hydrangeas are in bloom." Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, fast tears that I couldn't stop. He wasn't trying to trap me. He was giving me an exit strategy. He was so confident or so desperate that he was willing to give me the means to leave him, just to prove he wasn't the bad guy. I looked around the empty, luxurious penthouse. It suddenly felt very lonely without his brooding presence. I pulled out my phone. I had his number. He'd programmed it in yesterday. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I shouldn't. I should take the deed and run. I should go to Willow Creek and lock the door. He walked away toward the bar, his movements stiff and jerky, leaving me alone at the table with 2 dinners and a realization that terrified me more than any threat. He wasn't trying to dominate me. He was trying to survive me. Chapter 5. The Scent. The steak was delicious, but the adrenaline ruined my appetite. By midnight, the penthouse was silent. I had retreated to the guest bedroom. Not the nest, I couldn't handle the nest yet. But sleep was impossible. The sheets were too soft. The silence was too loud. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw Verrick's eyes dilating as I stole food from his plate. My inner wolf was pacing, agitated. He's here. He's close. Go to him. Shut up, I whispered to the empty room. I needed a distraction. I slipped out of bed, wrapping a silk robe around myself. It was one I'd found in the closet, emerald green, my color again. Of course. I crept out into the hallway. The penthouse was dark, save for the moonlight spilling in through the massive windows. I wandered toward the library I had seen earlier. If I couldn't sleep, I would read. The library was a 2-story masterpiece of dark wood and spiral staircases. It smelled of old paper and leather. I scanned the shelves, running my fingers over the spines of first editions that probably cost more than my car. Can't sleep? The voice came from the shadows of a wingback chair in the corner. I jumped, spinning around. Verrick was sitting there, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had discarded his shirt. I froze. He was magnificent. It was unfair, really. Broad chest defined by slabs of muscle, a stomach ridged with tension and scars. Faint silver lines crisscrossing his ribs that hinted at a violent past he claimed to have left behind. His skin was tanned, glowing faintly in the moonlight. "You're naked," I blurted out. "I'm wearing pants," he drawled, taking a sip of his drink. "And this is my house, Liora. I usually sleep in less." He set the glass down and stood up. The movement was predatory, fluid. He walked out of the shadows, and the moonlight hit him full force. He looked less like a CEO and more like the Lycan Prime he was, wild, imposing, and lethal. "Why are you awake?" I asked, clutching the lapels of my robe together. "Because you are in my house," he said simply, closing the distance between us. "And I can hear your heart beating from the other side of the apartment. It's racing. Are you scared?" "No," I lied. "Liar." He stopped a foot away. The air between us crackled. This wasn't the playful banter of the dinner table. This was primal. It was the middle of the night, and our defenses were down. "You smell like rain," he murmured, leaning in. He didn't touch me. He just inhaled. "Rain and wild lilac. It's driving me insane." "Verrick. I've spent centuries surrounded by artificial scents," he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that vibrated against my skin. "Expensive perfumes, cleaning chemicals, city smog. And then you walked into my boardroom and suddenly, for the first time in my life, I could breathe." He took another step. I backed up, hitting the bookshelf behind me. I was trapped. He placed his hands on the shelf on either side of my head, boxing me in. He leaned down, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I gasped. His nose brushed my skin, a wet, hot touch that sent a shockwave straight to my core. He inhaled deeply, a long, shuddering breath that sounded like a man surfacing after drowning. "Verrick, stop," I breathed, though my hands were itching to touch his bare chest. "I'm not touching you," he murmured against my throat. "I'm just memorizing." His lips grazed the sensitive spot below my ear. It wasn't a kiss. It was a tease. A promise. My knees buckled, and I would have slid to the floor if his body hadn't been so close, radiating heat that kept me upright. He pulled back slowly, his eyes blazing gold in the darkness. His restraint was palpable, a physical force holding back a tidal wave. He wanted to claim me. I could see it. I could feel his desire pressing against my mental shields. He wanted to bite, to mark, to take. But he didn't. "You have no idea," he rasped, his voice rough with pain. "How hard it is to stand this close to you and keep my hands on this shelf." He pushed himself away from the shelf with a groan, putting distance between us. He ran a hand through his hair, looking at me with a mixture of agony and affection. "Go to bed, Liora," he ordered, turning his back on me. "Lock the door. Because if you stay here looking at me like that, I'm going to forget that I'm a gentleman and I'm going to show you exactly why they call me dangerous." Chapter 6. The Gift. I didn't sleep. I laid in the bed staring at the ceiling until the sun came up, my skin still tingling where his breath had touched my neck. When I finally dragged myself out of the room at 8 a.m., the penthouse was empty. The silence was different in the daylight. It felt cold. I walked into the kitchen, half hoping to see him there, maybe making coffee shirtless. But the kitchen was pristine. There was a note on the counter, written in sharp, angular handwriting. "Had a meeting with the overseas investors. Didn't want to wake you. Eat something." I frowned. It felt normal, domestic. Like we were a couple who had been doing this for years, not two strangers trapped in a weird, fated mate standoff. A chime from the private elevator interrupted my thoughts. I jumped, expecting Verrick, but a young man in a courier uniform stepped out. "Delivery for Ms. Liora Harrow?" he asked, looking nervous. "That's me," I said, wary. He handed me a thick, heavy envelope. "Sign here, please." I signed, took the package, and waited for the elevator doors to close before I opened it. It was heavy. Legal documents. My stomach dropped. Was this another contract? Had Verrick lied about burning the debt? I tore open the seal and pulled out the stack of papers. I froze. It wasn't a debt collection. It was a deed. Property address, 42 Willow Creek Lane. My hand flew to my mouth. Willow Creek. My mother's house. The house where I grew up. The one with the wraparound porch and the oak tree where I'd had my first shift. My father had gambled it away 5 years ago. It had been sold to a developer who planned to bulldoze it for condos. I had cried for weeks when we lost it. It was the only place I had ever felt safe. I flipped through the pages. The transfer was complete. The mortgage was paid in full. The developer had been bought out, probably for an obscene amount of money. And the owner's name at the bottom wasn't Verrick Blackwood. It was Liora Harrow. He hadn't bought it for himself. He hadn't bought it to hold over my head. He had bought it, paid it off, and put it entirely in my name. I could leave right now, go there, and live rent-free for the rest of my life. He had literally handed me the keys to my independence. A note fell out of the back of the folder. "You said I couldn't buy you? You were right. But I can buy back the things that were stolen from you. It's not a cage if you have somewhere else to go. Go look at the garden. I hear the hydrangeas are in bloom." Tears pricked my eyes. Hot, fast tears that I couldn't stop. He wasn't trying to trap me. He was giving me an exit strategy. He was so confident or so desperate that he was willing to give me the means to leave him, just to prove he wasn't the bad guy. I looked around the empty, luxurious penthouse. It suddenly felt very lonely without his brooding presence. I pulled out my phone. I had his number. He'd programmed it in yesterday. My thumbs hovered over the screen. I shouldn't. I should take the deed and run. I should go to Willow Creek and lock the door. But I remembered the way he looked at me in the library, the way he burned $3 million without blinking, the way he bought my favorite tea. I typed the message before I could talk myself out of it. "The hydrangeas can wait. Come home early. I'm bored." I hit send. 3 seconds later, my phone buzzed. Meeting adjourned. "I'm 10 minutes away." I stared at the screen, my heart hammering a wild rhythm against my ribs. I wasn't running. I was digging in. And God help me, I couldn't wait for him to walk through that door. Chapter 7. The Water. 10 minutes. He said he was 10 minutes away. I stared at my phone, the screen still glowing with his text, and realized I had a problem. I was standing in the middle of a billion-dollar penthouse wearing a pair of old sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, "Not today, Satan." It wasn't exactly the attire of a woman who had just summoned a Lycan Prime home from a board meeting with a flirty text message. I needed to do something. I needed to burn off this nervous energy before I exploded. I remembered the tour he'd given me earlier, specifically the glass-enclosed heated pool on the upper terrace. I didn't overthink it. I found a swimsuit in the closet of the guest room. Black, high-cut, simple, but lethal. It fit like a second skin. I grabbed a towel and headed upstairs. The pool was stunning. Infinity edge, steam rising from the turquoise water, the city skyline acting as a wallpaper behind it. I dove in, the warm water shocking my system, and started swimming laps. 1, 2, 3. I pushed my body, letting the physical exertion drown out the voice in my head screaming that I was playing a dangerous game. I didn't hear the elevator, I didn't hear footsteps. I only knew he was there because the water changed. The ripples shifted, the air pressure in the room dropped, heavy with that cedar and rain scent that was quickly becoming my favorite drug. I swam to the edge and surfaced, slicking my wet hair back from my face. Verrick was standing at the edge of the pool. He had clearly come straight up. His tie was gone. His suit jacket was thrown carelessly onto a lounge chair. He was unbuttoning his cuffs, his golden eyes tracking water droplets as they raced down my neck. "You're early," I said, breathless. "I drove fast," he replied, his voice rough. He kicked off his shoes. "You said you were bored. I assumed that was code for entertain me." "Maybe," I challenged, treading water. "Or maybe I just wanted to see if you'd actually come." "Liora," he said, unbuttoning his shirt and revealing that sculpted, scarred chest again. "If you called me from the depths of hell, I'd come. A board meeting didn't stand a chance." He stepped out of his trousers. I tried not to look. I failed. He was massive. Thick thighs, rigid muscle, a body built for war, but currently repurposed for my viewing pleasure. He was wearing boxer briefs that left very little to the imagination. "Are you coming in?" I asked, my voice slightly higher than usual. "Or are you just going to stand there and model?" He smirked, a devastating, crooked thing, and stepped into the water. He didn't make a splash. He sank into the depths like a sea monster returning to the deep. He surfaced inches from me. The water level, which hit my chest, barely grazed his waist. The size difference between us was comical and thrilling. I felt like a doll next to him. "Better?" he asked, wiping water from his face. "Much," I whispered. He moved closer. The water swirled around us, reducing the friction of the world. In here, stripped of suits and contracts, we were just two bodies. "You have a deed in your name," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "You own a home. You have money in the bank. You could have left. Why are you here, Liora?" I floated toward him, drawn by a magnetism I couldn't fight. I placed my hands on his shoulders, his skin was wet and hot. "Because you bought my mother's house," I admitted. "Because you burned $3 million. And because I think I like the way you look at me." Verrick groaned, a sound that vibrated through the water and straight into my chest. He reached out, his large hands gripping my waist. He lifted me effortlessly, as if I weighed nothing, until I was buoyant, my legs instinctively wrapping around his torso to stay afloat. "And how do I look at you?" he demanded, his grip tightening. "Like you're starving," I whispered, leaning my forehead against his wet one. "And like I'm the only meal on earth." "I am starving," he confessed against my lips. "I've been starving for centuries." He began to walk backward, carrying me through the water toward the shallow end. The sensation of his skin sliding against mine, the wet friction, the heat of the water, it was sensory overload. "Verrick," I gasped as his hand slid lower, cupping me, holding me securely against him. "I've got you," he murmured. I won't let you drown. I'll never let you drown. He pinned me gently against the pool wall, his body caging mine. The playfulness was gone. The air was thick with lust. He stared at my mouth, then my neck, then my chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. "Kiss me," I dared him. He froze. His pupils were blown wide, black holes swallowing the gold. He looked like he was in physical pain. "If I kiss you now," he rasped, "we aren't making it out of this pool. And I promised myself I wouldn't take you on a wet tile floor like an animal. You deserve a bed. You deserve sheets. You deserve worship." He pulled back, his chest heaving, exercising a level of self-control that was frankly insulting. He set me down on the pool steps, backing away with his hands raised in surrender. "Get out, Liora," he commanded, his voice strained. "Get dried off, put on clothes, because my resolve is hanging by a very thin thread, and you are holding the scissors." Chapter 8. Safe Harbor. Dinner was a blur of sexual tension so thick you could cut it with a knife, followed by a hasty retreat to our separate corners. I fell asleep in the guest room, exhausted by the emotional whiplash of the day. I woke up to the sound of the world ending. A crack of thunder shook the entire penthouse, vibrating the glass walls. I shot up in bed, a scream dying in my throat. I hated storms. I hated the noise, the flashing light, the uncontrollable chaos of it. It reminded me of the night my father lost the Alpha title, a night of screaming, breaking glass, and a storm that tore the roof off our pack house. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room, turning the furniture into monstrous shapes. I scrambled backward, pressing my back against the headboard, pulling the duvet up to my chin. My heart was racing, skipping beats. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to regulate my breathing. 1, 2, 3. It's just noise. It's just noise. The door to my room flew open. "Liora?" Verrick was there. He was breathless, his hair messy, wearing nothing but sweatpants. He must have smelled my fear, the sharp, acrid scent of panic that spikes in a shifter's blood. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't turn on the light. He saw me huddled against the headboard, trembling as another boom of thunder rattled the windows, and he moved. He was across the room in a second. He didn't hesitate. He climbed onto the bed, ignoring the boundaries we had set, and pulled me into his arms. "I've got you," he rumbled, his voice deeper than the thunder. "I've got you. It's okay." I didn't fight him. I buried my face in his bare chest, clutching his shoulders. He was solid, warm, an unshakable anchor in the middle of the chaos. "I hate it," I whimpered, hating how weak I sounded. "Make it stop." "I can't stop the sky, Liora," he whispered, wrapping his large arms around me, effectively cocooning me against him. "But I can be the shelter." He shifted, pulling the heavy duvet over both of us. He maneuvered us until we were lying down, his back to the door, his body curled protectively around mine. He was the big spoon, his massive frame shielding me from the window, from the light, from the noise. He began to hum, a low, resonant sound deep in his chest. It wasn't a song, just a vibration, a purr. It traveled through his skin and into mine, overriding the frantic rhythm of my heart. "Focus on me," he instructed softly, his lips brushing the top of my head. "Listen to my heartbeat, smell the cedar. The storm is outside. In here, there is only us." I focused. I inhaled his scent, wood smoke and rain and safety. I listened to the steady, slow thump-thump of his heart. It was calm, unafraid. Slowly, the trembling stopped. The thunder became background noise, muffled by the wall of muscle surrounding me. "I'm sorry," I murmured into the darkness. "I'm supposed to be fierce." Verrick tightened his hold, pulling me flush against him. "You are fierce. But even queens need to rest. You've been fighting the whole world for years, Liora. Take the night off. Let me take the watch." It was the most romantic thing anyone had ever said to me. I relaxed, my body melting into his. His hand rubbed soothing circles on my back, a hypnotic rhythm that dragged my eyelids down. "Stay?" I whispered, half asleep. "Nowhere else I'd be," he promised. We didn't have sex. We didn't even kiss. We just lay there, tangled together in the dark, while the storm raged outside and failed to touch us. For the first time in my life, I fell asleep feeling completely, utterly safe. Chapter 9. The Edge. When I woke up, the storm was gone. Sunlight was streaming through the cracks in the curtains, and I was alone in the bed. The space beside me was still warm, and the pillow smelled like him, but Verrick was gone. I stretched, my body feeling heavy and languid, humming with a contentment I hadn't felt in, well, ever. But as the fog of sleep cleared, the contentment was replaced by something sharper, a hunger. Last night he had held me, he had comforted me. He had been the perfect gentleman, and frankly, I was getting sick of the gentleman. I sat up, throwing the covers off. I walked to the ensuite bathroom and caught my reflection. My hair was a mess, my lips were swollen from, well, nothing, and my eyes were bright. I needed to push him. I needed to see the control snap. I needed to know what lay beneath that veneer of infinite patience. I didn't put my own clothes back on. Instead, I walked into the hallway and found the laundry room. I found one of his dress shirts, a crisp white button-down that had just been pressed. I put it on. It was massive on me. The hem hit my mid-thigh and the sleeves hung past my hands. I rolled the sleeves up, left the top 3 buttons undone, and didn't bother with pants. I walked out into the living area. Verrick was there. He was sitting at the dining table, which was currently covered in laptops, tablets, and stacks of paper. He was on a call, a Bluetooth earpiece in his ear, looking furiously intense as he barked orders at some unfortunate executive. "I don't care what the projections say, Marcus. If the structural integrity isn't at 100%, we don't build. Period." He looked up as I walked in. He stopped talking. His eyes swept over me. The bare legs, the oversized shirt that was clearly his, the messy hair. His jaw clenched so hard I saw a muscle tick. "Sir?" The voice in his ear buzzed. "Are you still there?" Verrick didn't answer. He watched as I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a cup of coffee, and leaned against the counter, sipping it slowly while holding his gaze. "Verrick?" Marcus asked again. "Hold on," Verrick growled, tapping the mute button. He took the earpiece out and set it on the table. "Good morning." "Morning," I said, my voice husky. "Hope you don't mind. I couldn't find my robe." "That's my shirt," he noted. "It is," I agreed, walking toward him. "It smells like you. I like it." I stopped right next to his chair. I was playing a dangerous game, and I knew it. I reached out and ran a finger along the tense line of his shoulder, tracing the seam of his t-shirt. "You look busy," I murmured. "I am," he said, his voice tight. "I'm trying to run a multi-billion-dollar empire." "Don't let me stop you," I whispered. I leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to his jawline. I felt him shudder. I pulled back, smiling innocently. "I'll just be over here." Existing. I turned to walk away, making sure to let the shirt sway just enough to show a hint of thigh. "Liora!" The word was a warning, a low, vibrating threat. I stopped and looked back. "Yes?" Verrick stood up. The chair scraped violently against the floor. He didn't look like the protector from last night. He looked like the wolf who wanted to devour the moon. "You are playing with fire," he said, walking around the table. "You are bored, and you are testing me to see how much I can take before I break." "Is it working?" I asked, my heart pounding in my throat. He stopped inches from me. He reached out and gripped the fabric of the shirt at my waist, pulling me sharply against him. "You have no idea," he growled. "I have spent 10 years waiting for you. I have treated you like glass because I was afraid of scaring you away. But if you walk around my house wearing my skin, looking at me like you want to be eaten..." He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear, his hand tightening on my hip. I'm going to forget about the contract. I'm going to forget about being a gentleman. And I'm going to take you right here on this kitchen island. I shivered, heat pooling in my belly. This was it. The edge. So do it, I challenged, breathless. Verrick pulled back. His eyes were wild. He looked at the door to the office, then back at me. He was warring with himself. Run, he commanded, his voice raw. Go to the bedroom. Lock the door. If you don't leave this room in the next 5 seconds, Liora, I'm not letting you leave for 3 days. I looked at him. I saw the desperate need, the overwhelming love, and the terrifying power he was holding back. I smiled. I turned around and walked to the office door. I stepped through it, grabbed the handle, and looked back at him one last time. I'm not locking it, I whispered. Then I slammed the door shut, leaving him standing there in the silence, the echo of my invitation hanging in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Chapter 10. The Permission. I stood on the other side of the heavy oak door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't lock it. I left it unlatched, a silent invitation screaming louder than any words I could have spoken. I waited. 1 second, 2 seconds, 10. The silence from the living room was deafening. I expected the door to fly open. I expected the wood to splinter, or at the very least, the handle to turn with urgent predatory force. I had just taunted a Lycan Prime, a man known for his dominance, by wearing his clothes and practically begging him to chase me. But nothing happened. The silence stretched into a minute, then 2. My adrenaline began to curdle into something sour. Was he not coming? Had I miscalculated? Maybe the dangerous Lycan wasn't as obsessed as he claimed. Maybe my little game had crossed a line, and he was currently out there composing a polite email to his lawyer to have me evicted. My fierceness flickered, replaced by a cold spike of insecurity. I felt foolish standing there in his oversized shirt, waiting for a ravaging that wasn't arriving. Fine, I whispered to the empty room, anger flaring up to mask the hurt. Be that way. I grabbed the handle and ripped the door open, ready to storm back out there and demand to know why he was rejecting me. I didn't have to storm far. Verrick was standing right there. He hadn't moved to leave. He was standing 6 inches from the door, his forehead resting against the wood, his hands clenched into fists at his sides so tight his knuckles were white. When I opened the door, he stumbled forward slightly, catching himself on the doorframe. He looked wrecked. His eyes were blown wide, the gold irises swirling with a chaotic mix of lust and terrified restraint. He was breathing heavily, sweat beading on his temple. He looked like a man trying to hold back a tidal wave with a paper shield. You didn't come in, I accused, my voice trembling. I couldn't, he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel. He didn't look at my body. He kept his eyes locked on my face as if looking down would destroy him. Liora, you don't know what you're doing. You're playing games. You want the romance. You want the fantasy. I want you, I corrected, stepping closer. No, he growled, pushing himself back off the doorframe, putting a foot of distance between us. You want the man who buys you flowers and holds you through thunderstorms. But right now, the man is gone. The wolf is driving the car, and he doesn't want to hold you. He wants to mark you. He wants to claim you so thoroughly that you'll never be able to look at another man without feeling my teeth on your soul. He ran a hand through his dark hair, gripping the strands. I am trying to protect you from me. Why can't you see that? You are fragile, Liora. You are human soft compared to what I am. That was the wrong thing to say. The insecurity vanished, incinerated by a blaze of indignation. Fragile? I closed the distance between us in 2 strides. I didn't care that he was a foot taller. I didn't care that he could snap me in half. I grabbed the lapels of his shirt, my shirt, technically, that I was wearing. But since I couldn't grab that, I grabbed the waistband of his sweatpants and yanked him forward. I am not fragile, I hissed, glaring up into his stunned face. I survived a pack that sold me. I survived a father who gambled away my home. I walked into your tower and threatened you to your face. Do not dare treat me like I'm made of glass, Verrick Blackwood. Liora, shut up, I commanded. You're afraid? Good. Be afraid. But don't you dare use your fear as an excuse to starve us both. You say you want to claim me? Then do it. Stop asking for permission I've already given you 5 times. I took his hand, his massive, trembling hand, and placed it flat against my chest right over my beating heart. Feel that? I demanded. It's not racing because I'm scared of you. It's racing because I'm waiting for you. Verrick stared at me. The conflict in his eyes was warring, the protective gentleman against the possessive mate. He looked at my hand holding his against my chest. He felt the rhythm. You're sure, he whispered, his voice cracking. Once I start, Liora, I can't stop. There is no safe word for the mating bond. It is forever. I stood on my tiptoes. I wrapped my arms around his neck, pressing my body flush against his. I'm not looking for an escape, I whispered against his lips. I'm looking for the lock. Close the door, Verrick. His restraint snapped. I felt it happen, a physical release of tension that shuddered through his frame. A low, guttural growl ripped from his throat, vibrating through my entire skeletal system. As you wish, my queen. He didn't just close the door. He kicked it shut behind him without looking, the sound echoing like a gunshot, sealing us in. Chapter 11. Unleashed. The moment the door latched, the world tilted. Verrick didn't walk me to the bed. He didn't romance me with soft touches. He scooped me up, his arm banding around my waist like a steel bar, lifting me off the floor as if I were weightless. I gasped, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist to anchor myself. He was moving fast, driven by a biological imperative that had been denied for centuries. He carried me to the center of the room, but he didn't lay me down. He needed to be close. He needed to be everywhere at once. He pressed me against the wall, his mouth crashing onto mine. It wasn't a polite kiss. It was a devouring. It was hot, wet, and desperate. He tasted like coffee and raw power. His lips moved over mine with a bruising intensity, demanding entry, demanding submission, demanding everything I had held back. I met him stroke for stroke. I tangled my fingers in his hair, pulling him closer, opening for him. The sound he made, a mix of a groan and a snarl, ignited a fire in my belly that consumed every rational thought I had left. Mine. He growled against my mouth, biting my lower lip gently, testing the give of my skin. You are mine, Liora. Say it. Yours, I panted, breathless. I'm yours. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes were fully black now, the gold swallowed by the pupil, the beast fully at the surface. He looked terrifying. He looked beautiful. I tried to be gentle, he confessed, his hands running down my back, gripping my hips with enough force to leave bruises I would cherish tomorrow. I tried so hard. I don't want gentle, I breathed. I want you. He carried me to the massive bed, the nest he had built for me. He laid me down amongst the chaos of pillows, not with reverence, but with possessiveness. He followed me down immediately, his heavy body covering mine, blanketing me in his heat. The size difference was undeniable now. He was a mountain of muscle and hard angles. I was soft curves and yielding skin. He caged me in with his arms, his knees nudging my legs apart, settling between them as if he belonged there. He did belong there. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling sharply. He was scenting me again, but this time, he was layering his scent over mine. He rubbed his cheek against my jaw, his stubble grazing my skin, marking me. You smell like perfection, he murmured, his voice vibrating against my collarbone. You smell like my future." His hands were everywhere, roaming over my ribs, my stomach, my thighs. He wasn't just touching, he was mapping. He was memorizing the texture of my skin, the way I shivered under his palms. Every touch sent electric shocks through my nervous system. I arched into him, frustrated by the layers of clothing still between us. I tugged at the waistband of his sweatpants. "Verrick." "Patience," he growled, catching my wrists and pinning them above my head with one hand. "I have waited 200 years for this night. I am going to savor every second." He lowered his head and kissed the pulse point at the base of my throat. My heart leaped. The sensation was overwhelming. It wasn't just physical, it was energetic. With every inch of skin he touched, I felt walls crumbling inside me. The loneliness I had carried my whole life, the feeling of being the odd one out, the unwanted daughter, was dissolving under the sheer weight of his adoration. He worshipped me. He kissed his way down my chest, undoing the buttons of the shirt. His shirt. With agonizing slowness. He exposed my skin to the cool air of the room, only to immediately warm it with his mouth. "Beautiful," he whispered, pulling back to look at me. "So beautiful it hurts." I looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability beneath the lust. He needed this just as much as I did. He was the most powerful Lycan in the world, yet he was looking at me like I held the power of life and death over him. "Verrick?" I said softly, freeing one hand to cup his cheek. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know," he said, turning his face to kiss my palm, "because I'm about to make sure you never want to." He shifted, his body moving with a predatory grace, settling firmly against me. The friction was maddening. The heat was unbearable. "I need you," I pleaded, my dignity forgotten. "Please." Verrick's eyes flared. The plea snapped the last thread of his patience. "Open for me," he commanded. And when I did, he didn't hesitate. He claimed me, not with pain, but with a pressure and a fullness that stole the breath from my lungs. It was intense, primal, and absolutely perfect. The world narrowed down to the two of us, the rhythm of our bodies, the sound of our breath, and the growing, burning pressure of the bond waiting to be sealed. Chapter 12. The Mark. The physical act was incredible, but it was just the kindling. The real fire was the bond. As we moved together, the air in the room seemed to charge with static electricity. I could feel Verrick's emotions bleeding into mine, a torrent of overwhelming relief, possessive joy, and a love so deep it felt like drowning. He was driving us toward a precipice. His movements became sharper, more urgent. His control was fraying with every second. "Liora," he gasped, his voice tight. I need to do it," I cried out, sensing what he wanted, what he needed. "Mark me, Verrick. Do it now," he roared, a sound of pure triumph. He buried his hands in my hair, tilting my head back to expose the junction of my neck and shoulder, the mating spot, the place where the soul resided. He didn't bite immediately. He licked the spot, soothing the skin, preparing it. Then, with a surge of power that shook the bed, he sank his teeth in. It didn't hurt. Well, it hurt for a millisecond, a sharp pinch of breaking skin, but then it was replaced by a rush of endorphins so potent I saw stars. Snap. It felt like a physical tether snapping into place, a golden thread connecting my chest to his. Suddenly, the floodgates opened. "I love you. I love you. You are my life. You are my breath. I will burn the world for you." Verrick's thoughts. They flooded my mind, loud and clear, overlapping with my own. I wasn't hearing them with my ears. I was hearing them with my soul. I cried out, clutching his shoulders, tears streaming down my face. I wasn't alone anymore. I would never be alone again. I could feel him, the texture of his mind, the jagged edges of his past trauma, the soft warmth of his hope. And he could feel me, He groaned, his teeth still embedded in my skin, drinking in my acceptance, my joy, my fierceness. He was feeding on my emotions, just as I was feeding on his. He pulled back slowly, licking the mark to seal it. The wound closed instantly, leaving behind a scar that looked like a silver crescent moon. "Mine," he whispered, his forehead resting against mine. He was trembling violently. "My mate, my wife, my soul." "Yours," I sobbed, laughing through the tears. "I'm yours." We collapsed together, the adrenaline crash hitting us both at once. Verrick rolled to his side, pulling me with him so we were chest to chest, legs tangled, skin fused with sweat and the aftermath of magic. He ran his hand down my spine, tracing the vertebrae. "Can you hear me?" he thought, his voice echoing in my head. I gasped, looking into his eyes. "I can hear you," I projected back. Verrick smiled, a true, exhausted, blissful smile. "Good, because I have about 2 centuries of compliments I need to tell you, and I don't want to lose my voice." I buried my face in his chest, breathing in the scent of him, my mate. The emptiness that had defined my life was gone, filled to the brim with his presence. We lay there in the quiet aftermath, the storm outside forgotten, the contract forgotten. But as my breathing slowed and the euphoria settled, a new thought trickled into my mind, a realization of what this actually meant. I wasn't just Liora Harrow anymore. I wasn't just the girl who got sold to pay a gambling debt. I looked at the mark on his neck. I had marked him too, in the heat of the moment, though I hadn't realized it. A matching crescent. I was the mate of the Lycan Prime. I was the co-ruler of the largest shifter territory on the continent. I pushed myself up on one elbow, looking down at Verrick. He was half asleep, looking younger and softer than I had ever seen him. "Verrick?" He mumbled, keeping his eyes closed, his hand stroking my hip. "We have a problem," I whispered. One golden eye cracked open. "If you say you want to leave, I will put you in handcuffs, Liora. I'm not joking." "No," I said, biting my lip. "It's not that. It's just... Tomorrow is the annual Pack Summit. All the alphas are coming, including my father." Verrick's eyes snapped fully open. The sleep vanished. The predator returned, but this time, he was grinning. "That's not a problem, Liora," he said, pulling me back down for a kiss. That's the entertainment. Chapter 13. The Afterglow. Waking up with a mate bond was like waking up with a second operating system installed in your brain. Before I even opened my eyes, I felt him. Not just the physical weight of his arm draped over my waist, effectively pinning me to the mattress, but the hum of his existence. I felt a warm, golden sense of contentment that definitely wasn't mine. I was usually a morning grump. "You're awake?" a deep voice echoed in my head. I groaned, burying my face in the pillow. "Get out of my head, Verrick. It's too early for telepathy." A low chuckle vibrated against my back. Verrick shifted, nuzzling his face into the crook of my neck, right over the fresh, sensitive mark he'd left last night. The sensation sent a shiver straight to my toes. "I can't help it," he murmured aloud, his voice thick with sleep and satisfaction. "Your mind is loud. You're thinking about... pancakes?" I rolled over, facing him. He looked devastatingly handsome in the morning light, hair messy, jaw shadowed with stubble, and a lazy, possessive grin on his lips. "I'm thinking about how I'm going to survive the Pack Summit today," I corrected. "And yes, pancakes are a necessary part of that survival strategy." Verrick tightened his arm around me. "We could skip it." "We can't skip the summit, Verrick. You're the Prime. I'm the... well, whatever I am now." "You're the Prime's mate," he said, the title rolling off his tongue with relish. "And we can do whatever we want. I own the building the summit is held in. If I don't show up, they just stand around drinking cheap champagne and looking nervous." He sounded so arrogant, so completely unbothered by the politics that terrified everyone else. I reached up and traced the silver crescent scar on his neck. My mark on him. It was surreal. Yesterday, I was a bargaining chip. Today, I owned the man who owned the building. "We're going," I insisted, though I snuggled closer to him. "My father is going to be there. He thinks he sold me to a monster. I want him to see that I didn't just survive the monster. I tamed him." Verrick's eyes darkened, the gold swirling with a sudden spike of protective aggression. "He won't touch you. If he looks at you wrong, I'll remove his eyes." "Down, boy," I projected back, feeling a thrill at his possessiveness despite myself. "I don't need you to fight him. I need you to stand next to me while I handle him." Verrick kissed my forehead. "Deal." He finally let me up, though he grumbled about the loss of body heat. The next hour was a whirlwind of domestic luxury that I was still struggling to comprehend. Breakfast was wheeled in by a terrifyingly efficient staff member who didn't even blink at the fact that the Lycan Prime was hand-feeding me strawberries while wearing nothing but sweatpants. Then came the preparation. "I took the liberty," Verrick said, leading me to a dressing room I hadn't explored yet, "of updating your wardrobe, since you arrived with limited luggage." He opened the double doors. It wasn't a closet, it was a boutique. Rows of designer clothes, shelves of shoes, and a vanity table stocked with high-end cosmetics. But in the center of the room, hanging on a mannequin, was the dress. It wasn't white. It wasn't a soft, demure pastel suitable for a submissive wife. It was crimson. A deep, blood-red silk that looked like it was made of liquid fire. It was backless with a plunging neckline and a slit that went up to the hip. It was a power suit disguised as an evening gown. "Verrick," I breathed, walking toward it. "This is war paint," he finished, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "You said you wanted to show them you weren't a victim. Victims don't wear red, Liora. Queens do." I looked at him, feeling a surge of affection so strong it nearly knocked the wind out of me. He understood. He didn't want to hide me away. He wanted to weaponize my beauty and unleash it on the people who had underestimated me. "Put it on," he whispered, his eyes hungry. "Let's go show the world exactly who they messed with." 2 hours later, I stood in front of the full-length mirror. The dress fit like a second skin. My hair was styled in fierce, loose waves, and the makeup was sharp enough to cut glass. But the most prominent accessory wasn't the diamond earrings Verrick had clasped on my lobes. It was the mark. The dress was cut specifically to display the crescent moon scar on my neck. It was a brand, a warning, and a crown all in one. Verrick walked up behind me. He was wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my father's entire pack, but he looked lethal. He placed his hands on my bare shoulders, his dark eyes meeting mine in the reflection. "You look dangerous," he murmured. "Good," I said, lifting my chin. "I feel dangerous." He offered me his arm. "Then let's go. The sharks are waiting." Chapter 14. The Public Reveal. The Grand Lycan Summit was held in the Obsidian Hall, a massive ballroom in the center of the city. It was neutral ground, supposedly, where the 12 alpha packs gathered once a year to discuss territory, trade, and treaties. Usually, I sat in the back row with the other unmated females, invisible and silent, while my father drank too much scotch and made bad deals. Tonight, we arrived in a black motorcade that stopped right at the red carpet. The paparazzi were there, human press who thought this was just a billionaire's gala, and shifter press who knew exactly what this was. Flashes popped like strobe lights as the valet opened the door. Verrick stepped out first. The crowd went silent. His presence alone was enough to suck the oxygen out of the street. He buttoned his jacket, scanned the perimeter with a predator's gaze, and then turned back to the car. He didn't just wait for me. He extended his hand. I took it. As I stepped out, the crimson dress caught the light, blazing against the black car in the night sky. I heard the collective gasp. They knew who I was. Liora Harrow, the daughter of the failing River Rock Pack. the girl who was sold to clear a debt. They expected a broken girl. They expected a pet. Instead, I stood beside the Prime, my chin high, my hand resting possessively on his forearm. I felt Verrick's pride radiating through the bond, a warm, solid wall of look at her. Look at my queen. Ready? He whispered. Let's break them, I replied. We walked up the stairs and through the massive double doors. The ballroom was packed. Hundreds of shifters in their finest attire. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and the underlying musk of wolves posturing for dominance. When the herald announced us, the room didn't just go quiet. It went dead. Verrick Blackwood, Lycan Prime, and his mate, Liora. The mate dropped like a bomb. Heads snapped toward us, mouths fell open, glasses stopped halfway to lips. I scanned the room, finding the faces of people who had ignored me for years, the girls who had mocked my cheap clothes, the alphas who had pitied my father. And then I saw him. My father, Alpha Harrow. He was standing near the buffet, looking sweaty and nervous. When he saw me, his eyes bulged. He looked at the dress, the diamonds, and finally, the mark on my neck. Shock replaced fear. And then, slowly, a greasy, arrogant smile spread across his face. He puffed out his chest. He didn't see me. He saw his investment paying off. He saw a connection to the Prime. He started walking toward us, pushing people out of his way. "Liora!" he boomed, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "My daughter! Oh, thank the moon!" The crowd parted. Verrick stiffened beside me. I felt a low growl building in his chest, a vibration that traveled through his arm into mine. "Easy," I told him silently. "He's mine." My father stopped 3 feet away. He ignored Verrick, which was a suicidal mistake, and reached for my hands. "I knew it. I knew he would realize your worth. Look at you, girl. You've done well. This changes everything for the pack. We'll need to renegotiate the dowry, of course, now that you're the Prime's mate, but..." I didn't let him touch me. I took a single step back. "Don't," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the silence of the room, it carried to every corner. My father blinked. "Liora, don't be difficult. This is a celebration. I'm your alpha. I'm your father." "You were my alpha," I corrected, my voice ice cold. "And you were my father. Until you signed a piece of paper selling me for $3 million. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Shifters prided themselves on family loyalty. Selling a child was taboo, even if it happened in the shadows. Saying it out loud? That was social execution. It was a strategic alliance," my father stammered, his face turning red. "I did it for the pack, and look where you are. You should be thanking me." He reached out again, aggressive this time, trying to grab my arm to pull me into line. "You ungrateful little..." Verrick moved. It was a blur of motion, too fast for human eyes. But I was faster. Before Verrick could rip his throat out, I slapped my father's hand away. The sound was sharp, violent. "I am not a member of the River Rock Pack," I declared, staring him down. "I am the mate of the Lycan Prime. My pack is him." I gestured to Verrick. "And if you ever try to touch me again, I won't need my mate to protect me. I'll tear you apart myself." My father recoiled, looking at me like he'd never seen me before. He looked at Verrick, waiting for the Prime to discipline his unruly female. Verrick stepped forward, wrapping an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. He looked at my father with a smile that was all teeth. "You heard the lady," Verrick said, his voice a dark, delighted purr. "She's not yours anymore, Harrow, and frankly, I'd listen to her. She's much more dangerous than I am." My father paled, shrinking back into the crowd, humiliated and defeated. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had done it. I had faced the man who controlled my life for 20 years, and I had crushed him. But the night wasn't over. From the shadows of the VIP section, another figure emerged. a tall blonde woman in a silver dress flanked by 2 bodyguards. It was Serafina, the alpha female of the mountain pack, and the woman everyone had assumed Verrick would eventually marry for political gain. She walked toward us, looking me up and down with a sneer of pure disdain. "Cute performance," she drawled, stopping in front of us. She ignored me and looked at Verrick. "So you finally picked up a stray, Verrick? I suppose it's charming, in a charity case sort of way, but don't expect the council to accept a girl with no pedigree as a queen." Verrick's body went rigid. "Let me kill her," he thought. "No," I replied, smiling sweetly. I stepped away from Verrick, closing the distance between me and Serafina. I was shorter than her, but I felt 10 feet tall. "Pedigree is for dogs, Serafina," I said, my voice smooth and mocking. "And considering you've spent the last 5 years begging for his attention and getting ignored, I'd say the only stray in this room is you." I leaned in, whispering so only she and Verrick could hear. "Now bow to your queen, or get out of my hall." Chapter 15. Epilogue. Control. Serafina stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Her face flushed a deep, blotchy crimson that clashed horribly with her silver dress. She looked at her bodyguards, who were currently staring at their shoes, clearly unwilling to start a brawl with the Lycan Prime. Then she looked at Verrick, searching for any sign that he would step in and save her from the humiliation. Verrick didn't even blink. He just looked down at me with an expression of such intense, blinding pride that I felt it warm my skin. "I suggest you do as she says, Serafina," Verrick drawled, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silent ballroom. "My mate has a terrible temper, and unlike me, she doesn't believe in mercy." That was the nail in the coffin. The gathered crowd, alphas, politicians, socialites, watched with bated breath. The hierarchy had shifted in 10 seconds flat. Serafina realized she was standing on a precipice. She could fight and be destroyed, or she could submit and survive. She stiffened her spine, glared at me with pure venom, and then she dipped her head. It was barely a nod, a stiff, resentful twitch of a bow, but it was surrender. She turned on her heel and marched away, her bodyguards scrambling to keep up, leaving a wake of stunned silence behind her. The silence held for a heartbeat, and then the room exhaled. The music restarted. The chatter resumed, but the tone was different. It wasn't gossip anymore. It was respect. Verrick pulled me against his chest, burying his face in my hair right there in front of the entire werewolf nobility. "Remind me," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear, "never to get on your bad side." I looked up at him, grinning. "Too late. You married me." 3 months later. "You're doing it again?" a voice rumbled from the doorway. I didn't look up from the tablet in my hand. "Doing what?" "Taking over my company," Verrick said, walking into the office. We were back in the boardroom at the Spire, the same room where I had stormed in and slammed a contract on the table 90 days ago. But the dynamic had shifted significantly since then. For one, I wasn't standing on the other side of the table shouting. I was sitting in Verrick's massive leather chair, my feet propped up on the polished wood desk, reviewing the blueprints for the new sanctuary we were building in the unclaimed territories. Verrick, the terrifying Lycan Prime, was currently holding a smoothie, green, disgusting, forced upon him by me for health, and looking at me like I was the only thing in the universe that mattered. "I'm not taking over your company," I corrected, swiping to the next page of the blueprint. "I'm optimizing your philanthropic division. You were wasting millions on tax write-offs that didn't actually help anyone. Now we're building housing for packless shifters. You're welcome." Verrick rounded the desk. He didn't ask me to move. He simply leaned against the edge of the desk right next to my legs, trapping me in the chair. He reached out and tugged the tablet from my hands, setting it face down. "Hey," I protested, reaching for it. "I was reading that." "You've been reading that for 4 hours," he said, catching my hand and pressing a kiss to the palm. And I have been sitting in a budget meeting for 4 hours thinking about nothing but getting you naked. I smirked, leaning back in the chair, his chair. Sounds like a productivity issue, Mr. Blackwood. Maybe you should talk to HR. Verrick laughed, a low, rich sound that still made my toes curl. He moved, sliding into the space between my knees, his hands resting on the arms of the chair, caging me in. But it wasn't a trap. It was a fortress. You know, he mused, tilting his head. When you burst in here 3 months ago, you told me I had no control over you. I remember, I said, running my hands up the front of his shirt. And now? He asked, his golden eyes searching mine, half playful, half serious. I've given you my name. I've given you my fortune. I've let you turn my ruthless business empire into a humanitarian crusade. I sleep in a nest, filled with so many pillows I can barely find the bed. He leaned closer, his nose brushing mine. So tell me, Liora, be honest. Do I have any control over you yet? I looked at him. I looked at the man who could crush cities but chose to build me a garden. The man who had waited centuries just to burn a contract and set me free. The man who let me steal his chair, his food, and his heart without a single complaint. I smiled, tangling my fingers in his dark hair and pulling him down. None, I whispered against his lips. Verrick groaned, a sound of mock defeat. I was afraid of that. But, I added, biting his lower lip gently, I've decided to keep you anyway. You're trainable. Verrick growled, the vibration rumbling through my chest, and captured my mouth in a kiss that tasted of green smoothies and forever. He kissed me like I was the air he breathed, like I was the anchor that kept his world from spinning off its axis. I love you, he murmured against my mouth. My fierce, uncontrollable queen. I love you too, I whispered back. Now get off my desk. We have an empire to run. 5 more minutes, he bargained, ignoring my command and kissing my neck. Verrick, 10 more minutes. I laughed, giving in, and wrapped my arms around his neck. I had no control over him either, really. We were 2 storms that had collided and decided to rage together. And I wouldn't have it any other way.